I'm Dan Grabois. Welcome to $2 Broom, my podcast, and I'm speaking today with Frank London. Even though his window says Tina Kinderman, he is in fact Frank London. Hello, Frank.
Hi, Daniel. Dan. Hi, Dan.
Yeah, mine says Daniel, but I'm called Dan. Um, I've known Frank for a very long time, although we went years without seeing each other, and recently saw each other again. So you're a trumpet player, you're a composer, you're an arranger, you're an innovator, huge force behind the revival of klezmer music, but you play, I think, a lot of kinds of music. Let's talk about all that stuff. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Let's start with how did you get into this world, which is my world is so much a classical music world. You're in a very different world. So tell us your route into that world.
Okay. Okay. Um, I'm from Long Island, a suburban town in Long Island in the old school days when they had public music education as a fundamental thing. So in fourth grade, they said, "What instrument do you want to play?" I said, "Trumpet." So I started playing trumpet. I played in the school band and the school orchestra and the school jazz band or whatever it was, stage band, I think it was called. I didn't play in the school marching band, and they almost kicked me out of the music program because I hated marching bands. I think they're disgusting. But that's another point. Um, and really, all I really knew growing up musically was kind of rock and pop, soul music, whatever was on the radio. Although, like you, Dan, I did develop an early huge attraction for Frank Zappa and Captain Beefheart and all the other purveyors of weirdness. But really, living in a very typical suburban 60s, 70s environment, not a lot of diversity. I ended up, I'll skip one step, but I ended up at New England Conservatory in the late 1970s. And in Boston, I was in two programs, what they called the Third Stream program and the Afro-American Music program. And all of a sudden, I kind of went from just only really knowing pop music to hearing everything, and my mind got blown on a daily basis. And I found out very quickly that almost every culture has a music that needs a trumpet in it. So I took my attitude of just say yes to everything. And within, within a year or two being in Boston, I was playing in a salsa band, a merengue band, a Haitian band, a calypso band, doing Balkan music, playing new music ensembles, doing free improvisation, playing in jazz groups. Um, the list goes on. 2 more years later, I started playing klezmer music. Just say yes to any opportunity. And and then even started a band back then, which was devoted to learning brass band music from all around the world. So anything where I wasn't already in a band in Boston, we could do that. We did Italian brass band music and African brass band music, and just everything. So I think I liken it to the scene in The Wizard of Oz, where Dorothy goes from like the black and white of Kansas to the full color spectrum of Oz. And that's how it felt when I realized there were all these different musics in the world. And I could almost say that the next 55 years have just been about just diving into that, getting deeper in some of them because there's not time to do everything, and but endlessly fascinated by the variety of musical experiences and the fact that as a trumpeter I could be part of them.
Okay, let's get into that a little bit because this is such an interesting area. And I want to go a little bit the nerdy route because that's who I am. So let's talk about musical notation.
Hmm.
So for people watching the podcast, what I'm talking about is a staff of music with 5 lines with notes, and the notation tells you what note to play and how long to play it. But doesn't say that much about style, and you have engaged with style your entire career. Talk about going from being a player who plays notes to being a player who engages with styles that may be difficult to write down, to notate. Does that change somehow
Okay,
your
no,
musical
great,
processing?
great question. And I've thought about this a lot. I think I'm slightly different because I grew up equally with learning how to read notes through school, but also doing things by ear, playing. I think my first band in high school or junior high school were rock bands, and we would just listen to the records and copy the records. So the idea of learning by ear. And in fact, my mother was the town piano teacher, and she tried to give me piano lessons, but I could not study with my mother. So instead, I just figured out sort of how to play chords and harmonies by myself. That's not the point, though. That's just my path. What people don't realize often, especially people coming really from a straight Western classical background with written music and staffs and everything, is they think that that notation tells them everything they need to know. And that is such a false assumption because the truth is, if you don't know what a music is supposed to sound like, the notes on the staff are relatively meaningless. You said that it doesn't contain style, but it's much more than that. It doesn't tell you about timbre. It doesn't tell you about, I mean, I guess, okay. So here's it's sort of a joke, but it's not. If you walk into an audition, let's say, for an orchestra, and for the Count Basie Big Band, and there's a chart with a bunch of eighth notes. Those eighth notes do not mean the same thing. And if you don't know what those eighth notes are supposed to mean because you've heard it, then you're not gonna be able to do it. So the idea that the notation is a shortcut, but notation assumes a fluency or a familiarity with whatever style of music it is. And I just want to kind of just and get off that topic a little bit because of an experience I just had last week. I was out in Denver, Colorado, teaching some workshops, playing with a local brass band, doing stuff like that. And my hosts, lovely people who you should know because they're fantastic. They would love you. Um, a husband and wife, and they both play mariachi trumpet, trumpet and the husband, Tung Pham, is he also teaches a lot of mariachi. He teaches mariachi in the local school district at East High School. He teaches in the local community youth mariachi programs. And what they have is a pedagogy for learning your instrument, as long as it's, trumpet or violin or one of the mariachi, a pedagogy for learning the instrument where everything you're learning is applicable to mariachi music. In the same way that when we start playing our brass instruments and we get thrown, well, I'm going to speak trumpet, but the Arbin book or the Clark book or the Claude Gordon, we're being trained to play in the modes, in the scales, in the rhythms of the music that we're supposed to eventually play, which is classical music. And I think, wow, there should be a pedagogy from the very beginning for a jazz player right away. Because, when we're kids and we're learning the instruments, it's still all about air and articulation and it's all about that. But the other part, the style that you're learning, it's like they don't talk about that. They just assume that it's there. So I've thought about this a lot. So really, I believe you have to listen to music, even whether or not you're going to come to that music through written notation or by learning it by ear, you still have to know what it sounds like. Oh my God. So, oh, this was great in the mariachi class. One of the fundamentals in the most beginning, and in his trumpet class, there was like an 8-year-old and an 11-year-old and a 14-year-old. And one of the fundamentals is vibrato because the way they do vibrato, we're geeking out now, Dan. Um, so they do kind of a mouth vibrato. They don't do the hand vibrato that I sort of learned, or the diaphragm vibrato, but it's a timed vibrato, and that is considered a fundamental of learning your instrument because it's applicable to the music. So when we come to any music, and again, to get back to your point, and then I'll let you go on because I'm ranting a little bit.
That's
If
the
you
point of
see
the
a
podcast.
music, it doesn't tell you what kind of vibrato to use. You have to know what is, or you have to listen really hard and hear if you're auditioning or sitting in a band, hear what the other people are doing and match them. But it always the written music is just a shortcut. Theoretically, we could learn everything by ear, but it just takes longer. Of course, you remember it better if you've learned it by ear, but it takes longer to learn it.
I wonder if when you were at NEC, if you ever ran into, or later in your career, John Swallow, trombone. He taught trombone at
I
NEC.
know exactly who he is. I never had any interactions with him, but he was one of the major people. What makes you think about John Swallow? He
Because
was brilliant.
he was a brilliant. He was a trombonist. He's now been dead for maybe 10 or 15 years, sadly. But he's one of these people who, if you play the trombone, he either taught you or taught one of your teachers or taught one of your teachers' teacher. I mean, he had such a wide influence, and the major tenet of his teaching, and I'm going to strip it of the F bombs in which he always expressed this idea, but the idea was the style dictates the technique does not dictate the style. In other words, it's what you're talking about.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So you know what you want it to sound like. You make it sound like that. Let's call what you're doing a thing. Let's label that thing technique. Technique is that which you are doing when you're playing in the right style.
Yep. And then as a player and as a professional, I believe you have, two, in a very general sense, two choices. You can really perfect one technique, one style, and be really good at it and work in it and be very successful and very happy. Or you can develop the ability to adapt to different styles and techniques and analyze them. Oh, when I do this, I have to do this, I have to do this. And it's like it's your head, it's your ear, it's your embouchure, it's your air, it's everything. And I've chosen that route. That's the route I've chosen, and it's paid off in unbelievable ways for me. But
As we will explore.
You speak about John Swallow. You don't know, were you ever in Boston?
No. I
Okay.
mean, I've been in the city of Boston, but
Yeah,
never
but
as
you
a.
didn't know
Never.
John Coffey.
No.
Uh, he was one of the first real trumpet teachers I had. The legends about John Coffey, right across from the conservatory was Coffey Music. He made a ton of money renting band instruments to all the schools in the greater Boston area. That's how he made money, right? The legend is that he had been in the BSO as a trombonist, so he was one of Swallow's teachers, I believe. He was the generation before. He was
BSO Boston Symphony for people who
Yeah,
know.
yeah, BSO. He was a raging alcoholic, temperamental character. And, allegedly, he got fired for throwing his trombone at a conductor uh, who was like giving him too much grief about something. But he would teach anyone he would teach John Swallow, he would teach me, he would teach a 9-year-old beginner, charged $4 a lesson. And 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 his basic thing is just tongue and blow, kid. Just tongue. And I've been fortunate to have a few teachers who understood that the type of music, as a brass player, now we're talking as a brass player, even though the technique is dependent on the style and everything you said, certain fundamentals are the same everywhere. And putting air through the horn and tonguing and blowing, or what did they call it in the Chicago school? Wind and song or something like that.
Yes.
There's certain basics. It doesn't make a difference what you're playing. If you're not putting the air through the horn, you're not going to get anywhere.
Right.
And I love those teachers. And when I was ill and I didn't play for like 9 months because of my illness, and I had to come back, and you just go back to the absolute fundamentals, and it's put air through the horn.
Right. Right. Yeah, it's like jogging. I mean, you start by walking, then you increase the speed and the length of time. You don't have to think about which muscles to use when you walk. You just go. You choose just destination and you go.
My other great teacher, Bob McCoy, a brilliant, brilliant studio trumpet player. I thought of this because you talked about like you don't think about that what is natural. He noticed that I was being so unnatural about my breathing I would go. He said, Frank, when you talk, you don't like inhale, hold your breath, and I don't go, hello, Dan. You go, hi, Dan. And that kind of naturalness about what the body knows about breathing. So again, I love these fundamentals.
Yeah, and it I think always comes back to in whether it's athletics or music or anything that you have to do with your body, we have a new thing. We want to think about how to do it instead of relating the thing to what we already know how to do and trying to not think. So I suspect that when you went and played Haitian music or African brass band music, you were not thinking, okay, now I'm playing African brass band music, so I need to do this with my tongue and this with my air. You were just like hearing what the music should sound like and doing that thing.
Yes and no. Yes and no. I mean, yes is yes, so that's obvious. But and this happened a lot when I was getting into klezmer music, but with everything, to talk to the people who are experts in that and the more you learn about something, you can ask better questions. That's what I realized. So when I get into it, you know, find someone who knows that thing and ask them a better question, like, how do you do that? With you like geeking out, so I can be as technical as I like, right?
Sure, I'll explain things that need explaining for
You
the
know,
audience.
so as we know on the good old trumpet, we have our system of fingers, and the fourth partial is one and two. And in Balkan music, they hardly ever play one and two. They play three, which is, as we know, the same pipe length, the same note. And knowing that, that makes a big difference. And they do these ornaments where they don't trill, they kind of slap the fingers. It's amazing. So I was so the part, so I agree with you, except that when you start knowing people, to ask people who are the experts in that, how do you do that? Wait, how did you do that? I'm, big on learning it on techniques, because there are different techniques in different styles of music.
Right. Yeah, that's for sure. And a little tip on how you do that can open up a whole world. Like I've got
Exactly.
my third valve down, suddenly I can do this little flick motion and get the ornament that I never could achieve when I tried
Exactly.
to do it this way.
Right.
Yeah,
Which again gets back to the written music thing, because the written music isn't going to tell you that unless they've put written on the bottom, play third finger and so,
right.
stuff
So
like that.
there's this kind of oral history, oral tradition that's passed down through culture. Um, And when you have a technique book, it it divests itself of the oral tradition, which is why it's hard to learn to play an instrument from a book. You need a human being as guide, or recordings, or going to concerts, or hearing it,
I think one
or
of
a
the biggest
combination.
difference of generations from when we came up and the people coming up now is the advent of YouTube and videos, because I would learn things by ear, but I have to say, when you see the person playing it and you watch their fingers while you're listening, we get a lot more from that information. And I think people who grew up with videos and transcribe things, I think you can learn quicker by seeing the person do it.
Yeah. I'm thinking of music like, do you know the trumpeter Not Vilov, whose name I may be mispronouncing? He's
Yeah, yeah,
in
of course.
Macedonia. Yeah, yeah.
Not, yeah, his band was I'll tell you, yeah, not Velvet.
Kochani
Well, there
Orchestra.
were there's a big there's a big argument. There were two Kachani orchestras. You know, there was the original and the authentic, and Not was one of them. And in any case, yes.
It's like
Yeah,
the original Ray's Pizza. There's
yeah, it
many
was
original
totally a
Ray's
raise.
Pizza.
It was, I was gonna say that and I didn't think you knew that reference. It was totally a raised pizza
Right.
situation.
Well, I've listened to him, and it's just amazing that style of trumpet playing, which is very fast, and then these runs of very fast notes are also ornamented with even faster notes. And if I'm a kid trying to learn how to play that music on the trumpet, I can imagine that seeing a video of him doing it and how he does those finger flicks, which is probably the same technique, would be extraordinarily helpful.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So let's talk a little bit about klezmer because you're very well known for your work with the Klezmatics. Um, are you a founding member of the Klezmatics?
I am 40 years this year.
How did that group come about?
Um, Totally circumstantially and totally pragmatically. Many of us were new to New York, and some other guy who subsequently disappeared put an ad in the local newspaper saying looking for musicians to play in a klezmer band. And I had just come from Boston. I was playing in a group called the Klezmer Conservatory Band. And I thought, oh, this will be a way to make some money, get some extra gigs.
So you hadn't played klezmer at that point?
No, I had come from Boston. I had been playing with the Klezmer
Oh,
Conservatory
right. You said right, right.
for
So what was it like in those early years of the Klezmatics? Was everybody already adept in that style? How did the group find
no,
its
the first
voice?
couple of years were spent at really copying old recordings in order to try to get a band sound and get more into the old sound and the old style.
And were you arranging at that point? Because you've done I think you do a lot of the arranging for the Klezmatics.
Yeah, I do. I kind of I'm sort of self-taught as an arranger and a composer. Again, it's on the just say yes theory. Um, I think when I first joined like Volo Volo, the Haitian band, they're like, "Oh, we need horn arrangements." I'm like, "I'll do the horn arrangements." I have no idea how to do horn arrangements.
Talk about what an arrangement is for people who don't know and what that process is of arranging music.
You know, you think you've asked a simple question, but it's it's a very deep question. For me, I will answer your question, but I'm going to get to it sort of circuitously.
Take your time.
For me, the act of arranging is inextricably intertwined with the act of communicating to the other musicians what I want or need them to do to get the sound that I want. So for me, the act of arranging can include writing out completely notated top to bottom scores on one extreme to giving instructions by, just with words and making things happen. And usually it's somewhere in the spectrum in between those two. I would say arranging which includes composition, and often in my work, I blur the distinction between those two a lot because I mean I did that back then and I still do that now. Um, I work with, let's say, traditional material or other people's compositions, but then make something new out of it. And I take the approach of whatever it takes. Whatever it takes is what I'll do. So, uh, on the new Klezmatics album, we have a lot of collaborations. One of the pieces is a new inspirational political gospel song. It's the title track, We Were Made for These Times. We have a gospel choir and a gospel organist playing with us, singing and playing with us. And it's great, but I felt like, where's the klezmatic side? Of course, we could just play that and it would be fine. But where is the gospel side? So I tried to compose a Jewish klezmer sounding melody in a similar rhythm, in the same time signature and tempo as the gospel tune that I knew would fit my melody and the other melody would fit together and to make a bridge between these worlds. So it starts with my thing, and then there's an overlap of my thing and the gospel tune, and then it goes full dead on gospel. So that's just one example. I will do whatever it takes. Arranging can mean writing out parts. I want to hear certain harmonies. I want to hear certain rhythmic shifts. It can mean the form, the it's sculpting the music to sound the way it wants. And it is composition, except that maybe I'm not always using my original material, which would be composition. But it's the same thing. It's it's telling the individuals what to play, how to play, every aspect of it, to get a sound either that I envision or what is there a word for an
There
oral
is not,
and
and I
hearing
make that point frequently. There
and
is,
hearing, yeah,
yeah,
that
a
I hear
soundage instead of
a
an
sound.
image,
Yeah,
but that's not a
exactly.
real word.
But yeah, so it's and and usually the closer I can come to hearing something, then the better I can arrange it. But I got to tell you, sometimes I just make these guesses and I don't even know what it sounds like. And then I hear it and I'm either shocked that it works so well or I realize it doesn't work at all. And then I have to like throw it out and do something else. So
So let's see.
whatever it takes, that's the short answer.
So I'm to help people understand this who aren't musicians. Take a piece that's written for the piano, and you play in a string quartet. So you want to play that same piece on your string quartet. You want the notes and rhythms to be the same. So let's call that you're going to orchestrate that piano piece. That's an orchestration.
Absolutely.
Now let's say you want to take that piano piece, let's say it's by Chopin, it's a romantic piano piece, and you want to give it a different flavor. You want to give it, you feel like it almost suggests a Brazilian samba, something about the piece makes you think of that. You want to do a samba version. Now we're into more what you're talking about, where you're transforming an original, not just what the instruments are that are playing, but the kind of vibe, and maybe you're doing more composition, more changing. You're not having a 100% respect for authenticity. Instead, you're making a new thing based on the old thing.
Well, hold on. I don't want to. You're on a flow. We'll come back to the bit about authenticity.
It
Continue.
needs to be discussed,
That
which is
needs to
why I
be.
used that word.
But was that it, or do you want to?
Yeah, that's kind of I think that kind of unpacks what an arranger can do that's different from somebody who's just taking a tune that you know and saying the sax plays here, the trumpet plays here, and the piano plays this part.
Well, they're all aspects of arranging. Among the other aspects of it, I feel like the old Monty Python routine. You know, um, no one expects the Spanish Inquisition. You remember
I
that?
don't
Maybe
remember
you
that
don't.
one.
Oh, forget it. Not important. Um, Often we hear a melody, but we don't know the harmony. Like, which is as opposed to like taking the Chopin piano piece and doing it for strings because the harmony is there in the piece. But if you're just getting a melody, then you have options of how to harmonize that.
Right.
And that's I'm and within the klezmer world, that's especially poignant because we have lots of ethnological archives of people who went on ethnomusicological expeditions 120 years ago and would write down these melodies. So now we have these melodies, and then you can do what you want with them. So authenticity is, for me, a very problematic word. And
That is just so you know why I put that word
yeah,
in there.
so I would say um, there's a phrase that we like to use in my little sub world, which is we talk about the stylistic parameters of a genre, and we're aware when we are following the stylistic parameters of a genre or going outside the stylistic parameters of a genre. I would not say one is more authentic than the other. It's just a fact. Oh, this harmony, this rhythm, this whatever is perfectly within the stylistic parameters of this genre, and therefore I can write something new that sounds like what it was 100 years ago or 50 years ago, and it's also geographic. I can write or arrange something in the style of a piece from Latvia as opposed to a piece from Moldova, north and south, or something like that. So it's the more you understand those things, there it's just choices. I think it's all authentic. The question is it authentic what? Is it an authentic statement of the arranger composer? Is it an authentic, what is the authenticity? But I would fully agree that I am always aware when I'm within the stylistic parameters of the genre or when I've gone outside it. And one thing I love to do is to go outside of the stylistic parameters of the genre, but in ways that people don't hear so obviously, you know. So it's one thing to take I forget what your example was, the Chopin piece and make it into a Brazilian samba and change the rhythm. That's obvious. Oh, we've got a Brazilian rhythm here. But less obvious might be to use Brazilian harmonies, but keep it within the rhythm of the original. And even less obvious might be to use the formal structure that comes from a different tradition. I just did a little workshop at New England Conservatory, and it was based on it was a concert based on the Harry Smith anthologies, which are collections of old Americana recordings, and everything was related to that. And I found a piece on the old recordings, and it's really fun. It's kind of a square dancey kind of thing, but it's a novelty piece. And what it is, they play a melody, then they count one, two, three, four, and then they play another piece. It's almost like this weird medley. So I said to the students, well, let's take this structure of this piece from Harry Smith, and let's start with the piece he starts with, but let's insert things that are totally unexpected. And we went everything with the inserts um, from Schoenberg's for
Verklärte Nacht.
Clairton Nacht to Miles Davis's So What, but it was all in this, but the structure was the structure of this piece from this Americana recording. So there's lots of ways of taking things from different styles.
Yeah, on one of my group's recordings, the Meridian Arts Ensemble recording, we recorded some skunk funk, Brecker Brothers tune, and we inserted two bars from the Milton Babbitt brass quintet that he wrote for us. Same kind of idea, something unexpected.
Well, I
Uh,
want to hear that.
yeah,
But did the drummer keep the same rhythm? That
we kept the drums out, so it was like a little dream. You fell asleep for about 4 seconds and had a little dream,
I
and then it's
love
right
stuff
back to
like
skunk
I
funk.
love stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
I was thinking when I first talked about authenticity of the early music movement, which was growing when we were in school.
What they use the term performance practices.
Performance practices, and you
Yeah.
had to know how to do your trill in the correct way. And we must play this music on the instruments for which it was intended, where the operative part of that is we must. The idea that there's a right way to do these things, and virtue comes from doing it more right. And what I see on the other side at the same time that was happening is a lot of music that was doing mashups of different cultures, music that was just completely violating norms. So now I'm thinking of like Captain Beefheart, who you brought up at the very beginning, whose music was a kind of a blues based mayhem. And by the way, he didn't know how to read music. He would whistle the parts to his band members, and they would just have to memorize them or write them down. So this music, in one way, is just exploding outward, and in another way, is being condensed, and groups of people looking for the right way to do things. It's quite a tension, actually, and I think I see where you come out on in this. If you think of it as a debate, you're more of the my mind is wide open, but also there are styles with their own sound.
Yeah, but let's get back to that. How you opened this little conversation with the early music performance practice, because a couple of years ago I kind of did a big dive into that thing for both musical and for theoretical argumentative purposes, just to see what they were talking about. And I feel like my way of describing it is slightly different from theirs because I wish I could quote exactly what you said a second ago, Daniel, about, like I'm going to misquote you that it's better the more you have authentically gone back to the original and done it, the flute trills according to what's that name of that book of how to ornaments on the flute from 17 whatever. You know the book I'm talking about, and
Yeah,
instrument, and we're at A431, and all this stuff.
and there's a. I think the word I maybe used was correct or right. There's
Yeah.
a right way to do
So,
it.
and I know where that was coming from because I sort of like did this dive, and if we had been speaking 3 years ago, I could have told you the name of the guy who was the big hot Hartencourt, was it the big hothead?
Harnoncourt.
Yeah,
Harnoncourt.
in that performance practice thing. What had happened with the early music, it wasn't so much that they were trying to make it a mixture or world music or a synthesis. They had just all the things we were talking about in Western, just within pure Western classical music, had changed. Pitch had gotten higher, instruments had gotten louder, vibrato, the romantic movement. And it was a lusher, more romantic take on the text than maybe was originally um, intended. Now I have to sidetrack because we both know that within that movement, there's a lot of guesswork and people who assert that their guess is actually a fact when it's just a proposition, you know, and oh, this is exactly how Mozart or so and so tromboncino, who's one of my favorites, intended it. And then all of a sudden they say, well, maybe not. We don't know. We really don't know. We can make guesses, but I really hate people who go from guess to telling you that this is how it was. That's not my point. Point is, it clearly had become more romantic. And then Harnoncourt and those people, they stripped it back, and it's really beautiful what they did. And when you listen to like almost of the same period, I guess 1980s, maybe something like that, between the Vienna Phil playing some piece and then one of these early music ensembles. but it's also a matter, it's not about authentic, it's a matter of aesthetics. It's a matter of, at a certain point, taste. I mean, when we listen, the classic example that everyone will use is Glenn Gould playing Bach on the piano, right? And it's phenomenal. We know that this is not how Bach wrote it. We know that this is not how it sounded in 17 whatever or 16 whatever year that was. You probably know better than I. But musically it's phenomenal. It's got so much happening, and it is authentically Glenn Gould's take on Bach, and the text is there. So they both, so rather than judge it, this is more authentic, this is more this, it's just, oh, these are just, I analyze it for what it is. And then one can make a taste judgment. I mean, many people might like the more lush romantic take on early music than the sort of drier, take. And that's fine. That's because, as my father taught me early on, his one big saying was de gustibus non disputandum est. Do you know
I
this?
was just going to bring that exact phrase up. So you beat me
Exactly.
to the punch.
There can't, about matters of taste, you can't have an argument. If someone says, I like this, and you go, I don't like this, I like that. Okay, that's
Right.
great.
Yep.
That's not going to get us anywhere. But we can analyze, oh, so what is the difference? Oh, it's the vibrato, it's the this, it's the that. And then we make choices,
Yep.
you
Well,
know.
what's really ironic to me is seeing this happen in the other direction. So I'll give you an example. So Pink Floyd recorded Comfortably Numb, and David Gilmour played this just like the world's greatest guitar solo ever played. There's two guitar solos in that song, and they're usually rated as the best guitar solo of all time and the other best guitar solo of all time. And now David Gilmour goes out and performs, and he has to play those solos exactly the same 100 times a year because nobody wants to hear a different solo. So the pressures are really interesting with classical people deciding to go back and rock people not allowing things to move forward.
Yeah. And I mean, now you kind of opened up a whole nother discussion, which maybe we don't want to go into, which is assumptions about improvisation and stuff. And in the Ellington band, more or less each player on each song settled into the solo that was their solo on that song. And then they're not improvising, they're playing a composition,
Mm-hmm.
which is fine. Which is, let's not fetishize as they did. Oh my God. And it was so racist. That's another story. Don't get me started. Fetishizing the act of improvisation, as opposed to saying improvisation is this, composition is that. And in improv was we used to call improvisation composition in real time. But once you've made that thing, yes, someone can make a perfect composition in real time, as these two guitar players did. And then they're stuck having to do it all the time or not.
Yep.
That's I was just quipping and joking with someone about the Klezmatics 40 years in and stuff like this. And I said, we don't have to do that kind of thing because we're not that famous. We're not getting paid, $1 million a performance to do our greatest hit, and we have to do it exactly like it was. We're so marginal that we can do whatever the heck we want. So it's kind of like a blessing and a curse at the same time. Yeah, if, but I do know what you're saying. I do have some friends who audition. Okay, since you like Pink Floyd, when you go back, when one goes back to Dark Side of the Moon, the sax solos are some of the worst sax solos of all time. They sound like a bad lounge saxophone player. This is my biased opinion. And I had a friend who auditioned for actually, he got the gig playing on this is a number of years ago, Pink Floyd tour doing Dark Side of the Moon. And he had to play those terrible, loungy, tenor sax solos on every song because that's what people expected to hear. So yes, they have basically made it into a I won't say classical, into a repertory piece. They've made it into a repertory piece.
Yep.
Um, and just personally, I've been blessed that none of my work is so big that I have to do that. So I can just do whatever the heck I want.
We've been talking for 50 minutes, and I want to just spend the last bit talking a little bit more about klezmer, because of my own interest in klezmer, and because it's the Klezmatics 40th anniversary. And so let's start at the beginning. What the hell is klezmer?
Oh, that's easy. The definition. Klezmer is the instrumental, it's not vocal music. Klezmer is instrumental music. Klezmer is the instrumental music of the East European Ashkenazic Yiddish speaking Jews who lived in the Pale of Settlement from north to south, from all the way up in Lithuania to all the way down in Romania, and in that swath of land. And the music that was derived when those people left that area of diaspora and went into their further diasporas in Latin America, in North America, in Israel, and other countries. That's what klezmer is. Of course, musically, it is often exactly the same as the vocal music of those same Ashkenazic Yiddish speaking East European Jews. But by definition, if it's vocal music, it's not klezmer. It's called Yiddish song, it's called Hasidic song, it's called Yiddish theater music, whatever.
Okay. That said, the early years of the Klezmatics, you said you were studying the old recordings, learning the style, probably figuring out how to play in that style. Now there's a huge rock influence to my ear in the Klezmatics, but maybe you disagree. Certainly, you have unstrapped that sort of native original style of klezmer and taken it new places. What made that happen? What was the impulse? Was it you saying, "Let's do something different with these songs"? How did that creativity get unleashed?
Okay, this is a rather defensive reaction.
Oh, I was trying to be
No, no, hold on,
thoroughly
hold on, hold on.
complimentary, just
I'm
so you
I'm going
know.
to start with a defensive reaction, which is unnecessary, but is kind of necessary. Historically, let's be very clear. From almost the beginning of recorded music, 1910 or so, almost the beginning of recorded music, the beginning of recordings of klezmer music, you already have fusions. One of the early recordings by Lieutenant Joseph Frankel and his orchestra, 1914, I don't know, I could find the date. On one side of the 78 disc is the Yiddisher Charleston, and on the other side is the Yiddisher Shimmy. So taking contemporary American dance rhythms of the day and mixing them with the traditional klezmer music. So this is not my idea or the Klezmatics idea. This has been going on. And just to be a little bit on a soapbox, this is what happens with every music. Nothing stays, some people want to stay exactly the way it was and continue that, and that's a beautiful thing. Some people want to mix it with other stuff, and that is a beautiful thing, or they can both be terrible things and suck. For me, ultimately, it's not what you do, it's how you do it. That's what we do is, I mean, that's just hype. And as NWA said, don't believe the hype. We could talk about, we were called like, we use punk influences. There's nothing punk in the Klezmatics except maybe our attitude or something like that. That's all hype. But it's more about the way we integrate and this, we as a band used to have this whole argument about authenticity going from sort of a more psychological, Freudian or post-Freudian view of authenticity as a person. So for me to encounter this music, which is a historical music, for the encounter to be authentic, I can't deny who I am or deny what the thing is. We have to both meet on equal terms. So that's our little argument about authenticity, from a psychological point of view. From a more interesting musical, and this is more heartfelt than kind of the other ones, it's how we do it. It's how we do it. And and I think that the goal always is to create something really interesting musically and not worry about the label. And I'm very idea driven. So there's a piece on the new Klezmatics album called we call it the Pikelers Dance, the drummer's dance. And I set myself up a challenge. I said, well, I'd been listening to this old Tito Puente song, which Santana had a huge hit in the 60s, 70s called Para los Rumberos. Yeah, boom, 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 boom. We all know this. It was huge. And it's just a riff and with big drum solos for Tito and the other percussionists. I said, what would it mean to use that structure to feature our drummer? Not about Latin music per se, but and so the challenge, and then trying to figure out how do we use the different languages. It's I just love diving into these things and setting up these questions and trying to find the solutions. And other people set up the same questions and they find different solutions to them. Margot Leverett's interaction between klezmer and bluegrass with her klezmer mountain boys is very different from the klezmatics interactions of klezmer and Americana and bluegrass on our Woody Guthrie records. It's the same dialectical question, but the result is totally different. So for me, it's really what you do, and then the describing, is it klezmer, is it this, is that? Fine, we could dissect this. I like to joke uh, that the album that we won a Grammy for, the Wonder Wheel, the Klezmatics, the only klezmer band ever to win a Grammy, has almost no klezmer music on the entire album. And that's fine. It's a good album. It's good music.
Mm.
Um, and it's just, and in that one, we were just trying to make settings of the texts. I respect text so much. That's for me one of the highest arts is setting text and trying to bring out the what's in a text. And that's such a beautiful challenge. So I don't know. I think I feel like I've lost your question, Dan. But yeah,
Well, I think where you came to, which is it's good music. People like to listen to it, is the salient point here. And what makes music good is probably that people want to hear it.
that's one. Yeah.
Great. Well, tell us again what the name of the new album is. And I know you guys are going to be touring extensively and have been already.
We were made for these times.
And you're going on a tour, I think, pretty soon. Is that a US tour?
We've been touring since December on and off in fits and starts, tours, runouts, whatever it takes to keep the message. But it's all over the internet and yeah, doing our best.
Please keep that message coming.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.